Welcome to Frequency. I'm Jenni Field.
And I'm Gose. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. And Jenni, to kick things off this week, I only learned recently, we've talked about on this episode in the past, that we are going to be doing a live episode of Frequency at Unilever's Unite event, which I'm very excited for, but that they're also going to be live streaming that episode as well, which I am even more excited now that's going to be live streamed. So let's just let people know, if you haven't signed up for Unite yet, do that. You can't be in Nashville. Sucks for you. We'd love to have you there. But if you can't be there and you still want to participate, there is a virtual option and you get to see our two smiling faces on stage in Nashville.
Yeah, we can pop a link in the show notes for that so people can grab it.
And as we were getting prepped for this, Jenni, one of the things that I'm trying to learn, and we talked about this as we were getting ready, man, I got to slow down a little bit, Jenni. And I don't know how. We both were so excited that we were in bed separately, different time zones, different parts of the world. We were in bed both around 9:00 last night. And how glorious that was. You're in London, exciting city to be in.
Yeah.
I am in Las Vegas as we record this, a more exciting city to be in.
True.
And both in bed around 9:00 because sometimes you just have to call it and get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, I love it. I got into bed last night and it was about 9:06 and I was so pleased at getting into bed and just snuggling myself down and thinking, oh, this is lovely. The downside of that, though, is that I woke up at 5 a.m. this morning because my brain was like, oh, there's so much we need to do. But yeah, I love a 9:00 bedtime. I'd go to bed at 8:30, to be honest, if I given the choice.
But I think it's the same challenge of slowing down versus going to bed early. It is that, like, what am I missing? Am I going to miss out on something? And I have to get over that. I have to just realize you're going to have to miss out on things. And my wife, Kristen, mentioned, she's like, at some point you're going to have to, like, say no to things or slow down. And I'm like, I hear you. And I internally know that. But actually putting that out there and doing it is a different conversation, but I do need to at some point.
I do think that when we're in Nashville, there's not going to be any 9:00 bedtime.
It's not going to be the slow down time. No, it is not. It is not at all. Well, with that, Jenni, what do you have queued up for us this week?
So we are delving into leadership. We're going to be talking about humour, the future of internal comms, and the debate about blending the CHRO and CIO roles today. So I've got some of the latest research from the Institute of Leadership about what's on the mind of leaders. This is a member-only report that dropped into my inbox just yesterday. So I'm really pleased I can share that with you here. I'm also going to be sharing a bit more about a book that's coming out in December, which is challenging the future of internal comms and what that needs to look like. And we're going to have a bit of a chat about humour in comms and where its place is in organisations. But I want to kick us off with a Harvard Business Review article about whether CHRO and CIO roles should be blended. Now, we spoke about this topic back in May. It was episode 7 of our podcast where we talked about...
Nice research.
Thank you so much. I was pleased about that. Where we discussed Moderna, who were talking about merging HR and IT. Now we're nearly 5 months on from that. And there is a debate in Harvard Business Review with 3 experts weighing in on whether companies should merge the two functions to better navigate AI transformation. There are 3 different views, so I want to share those with you and then look at really where this is going. I think it's an interesting evolution from where we were in May. Now it's a bit deeper conversation, and then how that's probably going to carry forward into next year. So Keith Ferrazzi in the article argues against formal mergers, instead advocating for teamship, where HR and tech leaders co-lead with shared accountability across the functions. And they point to successful examples at Gap and Cisco where cross-functional collaboration has driven AI initiatives without having to do any restructuring. Peter Capelli takes a more conditional view, saying that mergers can work, but only if you find a rare leader who really genuinely understands both worlds. Otherwise, it's just a disaster waiting to happen. And Khalifa Oliver suggests the whole debate misses the point. And instead of obsessing over org charts, companies should focus on what problem they're trying to solve and whether their approach builds people-centered systems that enhance trust and adaptability. So all three generally agree that traditional siloed approaches won't work in the AI era that we're in and is coming. And they fundamentally disagree on whether the solution is better collaboration, strategic hiring, or just asking better questions. So, Chuck, do you think it's possible to blend these functions into one? Or would you agree with Oliver, who makes the very valid point about the debate missing the true essence of the problem that needs to be solved?
Yeah, if I think back through the three scenarios, I'm gonna cheat a bit and I'm gonna choose a little bit of option B and a little bit of option C on this.
Nice.
The reason being, I was thinking of as you were going through the middle one, which is thinking about the individual.
Yeah.
And I do believe you can have a very tech savvy CHRO who understands the role that technology plays in solving business problems. I also think it is possible that you could have a very people savvy CTO or CIO who understands, again, the importance of people involved in the tech process. But if you're not addressing option C, which is what problems are you solving, it sounds like you're just sort of throwing things against the wall and seeing what might stick. And I really think
Mhm.
it comes down to that individual. And let's say it is a situation. I don't know if this is the case with other organizations, but let's say you have a CTO leave the organization and your CHRO is pretty tech savvy. I could be like, okay, let's actually try this out. Maybe we
Mhm.
don't bring in another CTO or CIO. We actually bring in an IT leader that reports to the CHRO because they understand the challenges. Or the flip side of that, a CHRO leaves. I could see it being, hey, we've got the right person in place that we think can lead both organizations and actually knock down silos. 100% aligned with that. But to option C, if you're not solving problems out there and you're just making willy-nilly changes, which seems like a lot of organizations do because that's just how they feel about things, man, that just seems like you're setting everything up for failure at that point.
Do you think there is something to be said for not doing the merger at all and just having like a transformation director that is looking at it as a kind of separate piece? So this seems to be driven by the AI element and bringing that blend of AI and people and how we do that. I wonder if there's a third option, which is actually this is for neither the CHRO or the CIO, and actually this is about transformation, and it should be a transformation director's role to look at how the organization blends and changes and adapts to that AI era.
It sounds good, but it also sounds like a position that won't have a lot of authority inside an organization. Like they're gotta report to somewhere. And is that person part of the CHRO side or the
Yeah,
CTO side? And so I wonder, like, then they're gonna be leaning the direction of that org. So yeah, it sounds really good, but I don't know
yeah,
how effective ultimately that would
yeah.
be.
When you replied with that comment, I immediately thought of those people that get brought in to be like an employee experience director, and I always think that's a really challenging role because, like,
It is.
how much influence do you actually have, and like, where are you able to control or do anything? Because you're really an employee experience. You're looking at people and tech and culture and comms and all those things. So how are you able to do anything? And it just made me think of that at the same time. So I feel like we've landed on you've got to be able to know what the problem is, but really, it's a people and skills related thing about where that sits and whether it's blended or how that kind of works.
And
So,
I think we've all seen, I mean, we've worked for different organizations where you see different skills that maybe a CFO has. You're like, wow, that person actually understands it or they get it,
mm,
or a CMO. Other places, you see that they're not just laser focused on their one area. They actually do have a really nice
yeah,
perspective, and they are a strong leader and open to new ideas and open to feedback from organization below them. So I see that where it really comes down to that individual and do they have those right leadership capabilities to absorb other
Yeah.
parts of the org and still provide leadership for those teams.
Yeah. It's definitely a people-based
Hmm.
question. So the next article I want to talk about is about whether we should be funny in internal comms. And this was a post on LinkedIn by Rachel Warner, who was asking the question about whether can we be funny in internal comms? She said, in a recent comms nerd email, I referred to myself as a story hussy. And she said, now, I'm not saying that's funny, but it did start a great email chat with one reader about using humour in internal comms and how it feels a bit risky. So Rachel did a poll saying, do you use humour in your internal comms? 14% said, no, we're not allowed. 8% said, no, I'll explain why below. 24% said, we want to, but we aren't sure how. And 55% said, yes, we're proper lols here. You can tell that's not language I would normally say, as I said it. So my question is, to be funny, or is it culture dependent? Are there cultures or organizations where humor has no place, or should it always find a way?
I love the 14% of people that were like, no, we're not allowed.
There's
Like there's
no
some
fun.
kind of like, it's like in the plot like handbook that they get handed out, like no jokes. I think what's interesting about the humor discussion is the individual definitions of what we hear when we say humor. Some people think humor as jokes. Some people see it
Yes.
as simply being clever. Some might see it as being a little irreverent at times. I would put the story hussy as a little bit
Hmm.
irreverent at times. And sometimes you have to catch people off guard a little bit with communication. I think throwing in those little irreverent moments or clever moments like that is a way to get people's attention. So absolutely humor has a role to play. I just think if you have to tell people, hey, we're going to be funny here today, that doesn't feel humorous. I think it
Yes.
has to be natural. So there was an event I was speaking at, and I forget what question. Maybe it was something about like, oh, who in the room like really enjoys like poring over data? Who really enjoys like getting into the nitty gritty and looking at trends and all that? And a couple people's hands went up, and I was like, it's good. Everybody's got their kinks out there. And just saying the word kink in that conversation all of a sudden got everyone's attention. Because I wasn't trying to be funny. I wasn't trying to get a laugh. I was
Yeah.
trying to poke and prod a little bit. And I think that's where we should use it to try to get some attention and get people to pay attention by maybe throwing in some language that just people aren't expecting. Again, not about
Mm,
one-liners or it's not about punchlines. Sometimes it's about just having a little irreverent content in there and having
mm.
some fun with it.
It got me thinking about a few different things. The first thing that came to mind was the fact that I'm told that I'm fun, but I'm not funny. Which I always enjoy to be told that. And it also got me thinking about the conversation we had the other week about joy and satisfaction and the joy in organizations and whether that's sort of gone away. So the people that have said we're not allowed, is that because we've lost that ability to bring that joy into the workplace and the stuff that is fun? Possibly. And then it got me thinking about a comms team that I was working with the other day who were discussing sort of campaigns and external campaigns they were doing for marketing and how to bring those to life internally and whether to do sort of a life-size version of the character that was in the external adverts and things like that. And I could see as this was being discussed, as the director was saying, we could have a life-size version and they could walk around the office. I could literally see the people in the team going, oh God, this is horrible. I could feel their, like, real discomfort of wanting to take their skin off while this was being said. And then I started thinking about what are the values of the organization? How does the sort of the fun and the humor fit with those? And there wasn't much of that in the values, so I could see why it was uncomfortable. But I wonder if there's something about, to your point, you made the comment, you did that as you. So that's not using humor in internal comms. That's a leader using humor or an individual. And I think it can feel contrived when you're trying to do it as a corporate voice that doesn't have
Mhm.
a person behind it. So I think that would be my exploration of it, is it's the person that has to bring the humor.
Yes.
Therefore, in terms of do you use humor in your internal comms feels a bit faceless. And I think that's hard to do if you've got sort of a corporate newsletter that goes out. but the individual can do it and they can bring that language in and they can bring that lighthearted piece that creates that connection, which I think
Yeah,
is where it should sit.
it has to be real, and you might have some people on your team that are fun, not funny. You might have some people on your team that are funny and not fun. But if they aren't allowed to be themselves, then they're being held back. And so
Yeah.
if you it's really letting people be themselves. There are
Mhm.
people that we see all the time who are very naturally funny. Like whether it is cracking jokes or just making light of moments, and they're very quick on their feet with snappy comments. That's a key part of, I think, any sort of company culture. But if you're also part of a culture where that's not accepted, then you're not going to fit in. You're not going to
Mm.
bring yourself to work unless you've got those sort of inside jokes that happen
Yeah.
inside teams and those stories that get carried, throughout new people coming in. And I think that's where humor is really helpful, is helping teams bond together and feel like there's this
Yes.
collection. And we talk about it like it's not about jargon and all those acronyms that sometimes unite. I think sometimes it's those inside jokes that
Mm.
bond and bring teams together. And it's those humorous moments that happen naturally in our lives that allow us to form those microcultures that exist inside organizations.
Mm. I don't know whether you ever saw, there was a bit of a trend, I think, across the UK a couple of years ago and still carrying on a little bit for internal communicators to go and do stand-up comedy courses. And I kept
Hmm.
seeing people going, and I don't know if people were doing it in the US, but there was quite a few people in the UK doing it. And I don't really get that, but like personally, I was like, I don't feel like I need to go and do stand-up comedy in order to bring some humor in, but I just there's a link there somewhere for me, which is that trying to get more creativity or trying to bring more lightheartedness? And is that a way to do it, or does that feel a bit strange? Sort of
I
thinking out.
think that's more of a confidence builder thing, because that that
Okay.
that takes
Yeah.
a lot of confidence to go up and
Yeah.
you know, do stand up. I don't know. I'm a pretty confident person. I don't know that I would have that,
No.
though that would be an interesting challenge to
Okay.
take. So I think there's elements that we all have where we enjoy humor. Now, I think what would be interesting is the difference. We could do an entire series of episodes about the difference in British humor versus American humor. And we could simply compare the original Office versus the American
We
Office
could.
and see how those two shows, name the same, very different humor, which also speaks to multicultural organizations and the challenge that humor, what
Yeah.
really funny in one
Yeah.
geographic culture might not even be relevant or
Yeah.
understood in another one. So there are some risks with humor, but I think those are risks worth taking.
Yeah. And for the record, I much prefer the US office. I find the UK office incredibly uncomfortable to watch.
But maybe
For the
that
record.
was the point.
I can't do I don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy uncomfortable humor, that's not for me. Right, I'm gonna move us on to a new book that is coming out in December this year. So there's a book coming out called People First: Internal Communication. It's written by Lee Smith and Emma Bridger, and they sent me a copy of the book as a PDF to have a read of it before it comes out, always in the hope, obviously, that someone's going to read it and endorse it and say, this is brilliant. And I am. I absolutely was thrilled to read it. And I did a post on LinkedIn sharing about the fact that last year I was really struggling with talking about the fact that I worked in internal comms because I just didn't feel like I did anymore. There was so much content coming out from consultants and practitioners about sort of making town halls better, about channels, about some of the stuff that I was probably doing a long time ago. And I didn't feel like that represented what I was doing now, which is much more about culture, leadership, creating connection through communication. And when I was reading this book from Lee and Emma, it was beautifully articulating the challenge that I was having last year about what internal communications is and what it means to be an internal communicator in the future. And so as I was reading the book, everything started to fall into place, and they call it people first internal communication. So there were some lovely frameworks in the book, which I wanted to talk about here, and I've got their permission to share that. So we're all good. And I'll pop a link in the show notes if anybody wants to pre-order the book to have a read about their sort of framework. But it really shines a light on the road that internal communication practitioners need to take to be that strategic partner, to sort of stop talking about channels and audience segmentation and messaging, all important, But actually, if that's just what you're looking at, then it's going to be a real struggle to be a trusted advisor and be an internal communicator going forward. So they share a sort of table or graphic in the book where they list the key capabilities, then they list a set of superpowers, and then they list a set of strategic skills. So in the key capabilities list, they've got creating and curating content, strategy and planning, program delivery, channel and community management, measurement and reporting. Very good. In superpowers, we've got empathy, curiosity, resilience, creativity, influence, and courage. And then in the strategic skills list, we have human centered design, behavioral science, systems thinking, facilitation and coaching, stakeholder engagement, and AI augmented practice. Now, I really liked this, and I shared this with a client the other day when we were talking about the skills in their team and what they needed to do to develop and become that trusted advisor and partner. But I wanted to share it here and just get your take on it, Chuck. I think we have lots of conversations about the future of internal comms and the conversations that we wish would stop. I had a moment of sort of falling out of love with internal comms. Lee and Emma talk about that in the book. Have you ever had that moment? And what do you think about this list of strategic skills in terms of the things that need to be done going forward for the profession?
I wouldn't say that I've ever fallen out of love with internal comms. I think I've fallen out of love with some of the conversations that
Hmm.
we keep having.
Hmm.
And where they said that we're at a crossroads, I feel like we've been perpetually at this crossroads of trying to figure out exactly who we are, what we do, why are we here, why are we doing what we're doing, who are we serving, like all of those things. I feel like we've been at
Yeah.
that space. And any conversation that moves people in the right direction out of those crossroads, I think is a worthy one. Lee Smith and I go back a bit, and I think he intended to also send me a copy of this, but thought he did, but didn't. So I haven't had a chance to read it. So I'm glad you did. Looking through this, it's hard to argue with any of the capabilities or skills or superpowers. I think the pressure though might be, with superpowers, that's that's a lot to put on someone's shoulders. And can you have all of these superpowers? And can all of these things be your superpower? That's a lot to put on
Hmm.
people to say you've got to be super at empathy and being curious and resiliency and being creative and influencing and being creative. Like that's a lot to put on someone's and also have these basic capabilities and also these skills at play. So I think it's more of me having not read the book, but wanting to understand,
Mm.
is that the expectation that you have to be super at all of these things? Because looking at one, there's actually a skill or capability or superpower that I think of all the time that I see that's missing. And this isn't a critique of the
Hmm.
book, but it's problem solving.
Hmm.
And I think that's actually whether you want to label that as a skill or superpower or capability, I could see it fitting in to one of those three. And with problem solving, you need to be resilient and creative and curious and all of those elements. So I see that as something that the strongest communicators I see out there are big problem solvers. And the organization sees them as
Yeah.
problem solvers.
Do you think one of the things that it sparked a thought for me was they've called it people first internal communication. They've talked about the crossroads we're in. They've talked about the communication experience. They talk about that in the book that individuals have during their time at work. The thing that stuck with me a little bit is whether internal communication is the right name for the function of the future. Because if I think about internal communication from an evolution perspective, where it started with the newsletters, the magazines, the sort of broadcast, there was that two-way, but it started literally as kind of the channels and the messaging and the content. It's evolved, not everywhere, but a lot of places it's evolved into this work that we do, which is culture, leadership, looking at all of those different elements, more around the employee experience. But it feels like internal communication isn't the right name for the function when it's evolved into that broader stuff. And I don't know what that is then called.
Are you ready for that conversation? I'm just thinking through like when I see the things that people in HR, like we're a chief people officer, we're a CHRO, we're a people team, I mean, it's like they're like
Yeah.
throwing around names to try to sound different. And I wonder, like, if we try to start calling this something else, is that only going to add more confusion to it? Because I'm sure it
Yeah.
really came from internal being the opposite of external, right? That was probably
Yeah.
like, there was this, and it wasn't like there was PR, and then it was like, well, that's public relations, so this is employee relations. Well, no, that's more labor. It feels like more
Yeah.
HR stuff. So I feel like we kind of settled on internal comms, not in a bad way, but and I don't know that we're ready as a profession to like start calling ourselves something else. I don't know that we're ready for that.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's the conversation of the future. I'm with you on the, are you ready for this conversation? I'm ready to have that conversation, but I don't know whether it's because we just need to be enveloped into something else, and I'm not ready to have that conversation out
Okay.
loud
All
yet.
right. Fair enough. Okay.
So I'm going to stop us there. Just a quick note on the on the book from Lee and Emma. They are doing a webinar on the 14th of October, so I'll pop a link into the show notes for that as well for you to take a look. But I was really chuffed to be able to read it in advance, and it's
Well,
always a
I'm
privilege.
glad you also got an advance
Yeah,
copy,
I'm
Jenny.
sorry you didn't. I'm sure Lee is listening to this and kicking himself for that. The next thing I want to talk about is a report from the Institute of Leadership. It's called Leading into the Future. This is the report I mentioned at the start that's only available to members, and it arrived in my inbox this week. So the research surveyed 350 leaders across various organisation sizes and roles from April and May this year. Now, the report reveals a bit of a paradox. It's clearly showing that leaders know they need to adapt quickly to the accelerating change that's happening, but many lack confidence in the technologies that are driving that change. They're prioritizing human centric leadership, so self reflection, ethics, employee engagement, while they're also struggling with the digital transformation. It does suggest that successful leadership in 2025 is going to require this balance between sort of that technological capability and then these sort of really deep human skills that leaders need to have. Now, I've got some data from the report to share as well. So, in terms of AI implementation uncertainty, 41% say the costs are too high, and nearly a third are unsure how to implement it, with 20% very confident with the new tech, just 20%. In themes around workforce recruitment and retention, 50% are struggling with recruiting, 49% with retention, and only 5% are saying there will be no staff challenges. In terms of change, managing that accelerating change that we're seeing, 77% expect there to be more change, with economic at 85%, geopolitical at 64%, and tech factors at 63% driving that change. They talk about decision making under pressure. So 79% are saying that the need for self reflection is important, whilst at the same time facing time constraints and rapid decisions. And this human centric leadership's coming in. So they're prioritizing engagement, employee engagement at 62%, and team development at 58%. Interestingly, this employee engagement number of 62% is what comes up when they're asked, what does success look like? It's the top measure. What does success look like to you? Employee engagement, 62%. Customer satisfaction, a bit further down the list at 57%. So the report shows 72% of leaders are rethinking their recruitment strategies, but they're saying it's not just about salary and it's about providing this sort of purpose, growth opportunities, and well-being. My question for you, Chuck, is how do you think internal comms teams can help leaders really articulate and deliver on that promise and do that authentically rather than it just feeling like a lot of corporate speak, which it did as it came out of my mouth?
Yes, as you were reading that, it felt like a lot of corporate speak coming out. I have two very jaded points of view on this, Jenny. One of which is this is one of those things where communicators have to speak truth to power.
Okay.
I think you have to push back on some of these things. It's like, is this really we're saying this, but behaviors say something else. And when they talked about how they're prioritizing human-centric leadership, I don't even know. That sounds really good. But like previous episodes, we talked about how they're eliminating human leadership. Like they're eliminating middle managers. They're putting more people. Like how is that
Mhm.
prioritizing human-centric leadership? What else are you leading? Project-centrically? Like I don't know what we're like. If you're, is that the switch? Is they're now focusing more on people than the work? But it doesn't feel like that's what's actually playing out in the world. I think this is this very idealistic
Mm.
response to things. I will say some of the other data, like half struggle with recruiting, so that means half don't. So I'm like, I don't know, what is that really telling us anything? Same thing with retention. So is it the same half? Is it the same half that's struggling with recruiting and retention and the other half like have it figured out? Like what can they learn from each other? Even some of the AI stuff where they're saying a third are unsure how to implement, that means two-thirds are sure, which we're also not seeing play out in the world, that there's all this confusion around
Mm.
AI. Is this just them wanting to sound better when they responded to this survey, but in reality, they're just as clueless as the rest
Mm.
of us? Like, that's where I'd rather see leaders come and be like, we don't know. We
Yeah.
are, and also there's another part around that 77% expect more change with like only 64% think geopolitical stuff is going to drive it. Like, are they so insular? Are they so confined that they're not realizing what's happening in the outside world and what that impact is going to have for them? I don't know. I'm not buying a lot of this. I'm not
So
buying what they're selling.
I couldn't believe the employee engagement number as the top of the list of success factors,
It
given
just
the
doesn't seem
conversations that we've
real.
had. Like, I was like, this can't be true when, like you said, we're seeing managers being taken out of organizations. We're seeing engagement, the average engagement score around the world is, 26%, I think I was talking about the other week. And I wrote an article on LinkedIn about this whole misalignment of expectations when it comes to engagement, because I don't believe it. I don't. If that is really your measure of success, then you're doing the exact opposite actions in order to achieve that. And I would love to explore more into this research in terms of, like, I want these leaders in a room and I want to talk to them about that number and actually what they're doing to then achieve that. Because if that is truly your measure of success, then let's get together and share all the activities we're doing to achieve that, so that everyone else can do the same thing. Because I'm with you. I'm just not seeing it. Just not seeing
Yeah.
it reflected in the reality.
For me, the math isn't mathing and the behaviors don't reflect what they're saying.
I'm
Like
not behavioring.
it doesn't add up. Doesn't add up.
I do think the AI stuff is. I know what you said about it means that two-thirds are sure, but that 20% of people being very confident, again, it's almost like it's swinging one way and swinging another. But I think that in some ways does reflect the challenge of AI. I think we've
Mhm.
got sort of not very confident, don't know what we're doing. We are sure, but it's very expensive. Just no one knows what they're doing. And it sort of feels a bit like that. And I wonder if there's just so much volatility in the world at the moment that actually the biggest challenge for leaders is just trying to juggle the sheer volume of changes that are going on,
Mm.
whether it is technology, whether it's the challenges of retention, the job market, all of it is is just making it so challenging that it just feels chaotic, and the data is representing a chaotic life
Mhm.
leadership, maybe. Maybe.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll see if I can find out a little bit more. So that is the end of our articles this week. What are you freaking out about?
I am not gonna research into that a little bit more. I actually
I
I'm not
this is
I'm
this is
not
my
gonna
kink. I've got that kink. I'm gonna
I'm
have
not
to.
gonna spend that time on it. So it's not my freak out. My freak out was this one piece of data that came across my view on LinkedIn is that Meta announced that they now have not 3 billion users on Instagram. They have 3 billion active monthly users on Instagram. 3 billion people in the world are actively using Instagram at least every month. That is ballpark oversimplification, a little under half of the global population is on Instagram monthly. And I'm, it's not the number, it's the impact and the
Mm,
manipulation that could happen. And I'm not a tinfoil hat conspiracy person, but you wonder about the algorithms that are out there. And you think that there is one platform that potentially has influence over half of the global population total. That's not even like children who are 2 and 3 are counting in the number. Like
Mm,
that's kind of freaking me out in a really negative way
mhm,
to think of the control that a few of the tech titans have and the influence that they have. I think we're seeing that play out geopolitically, and it's
mm.
absolutely frightening to me.
Have you read the book, The Science of Fear?
No,
Okay,
it
so,
sounds terrifying.
well, indeed, and the cover is a giant spider, which I had a real issue with. But, I happened to read this book in February 2020, so it was very well timed ahead of the pandemic, and it was not intentional, but it was an exceptional book about, the media, about fear, about how it all works to drive certain behaviors and how we work as human beings when it comes to fear. And I've mentioned it probably about 8 times in the last 2 weeks to friends of mine in the UK with everything that's been going on around the flags and everything here, because there's things being surfaced across social media to individuals which I don't see as a white woman in the UK. I have not seen that content on Instagram or I don't have TikTok, but I haven't seen it. Whereas my friends who are the target demographic to frighten have seen that content. And that is where I echo your sentiments of the power that that has and how that's being used. So I just the book is brilliant, and I would encourage anyone to
Yeah.
read it to sort of get some sense of understanding of what it's doing, and then you're able to ignore it a bit more because you know it's all playing a game, which is not nice, fair, or
Yeah.
appropriate. But
It's a
it's
bit of that. It's a bit of the power, a little bit of the impact, and then the third part is that manipulation of
yeah,
it. That it's not necessarily them because they're able to step back and be like, wait, no, we just built the thing. We're not controlling it. Yeah, but you're letting other people put stuff in there and
yeah,
target that does. And so I don't think they can step away from the responsibility and the impact that they have, though
yeah,
they do a good job of doing that.
yeah,
There's just that number and rationalizing that with the global population and realizing that the influence and potential manipulation or intended manipulation that can have is freak me out.
yeah. Well, it's fair. It's a fair freak out. So my freak out is that there's less than 100 days left of
That
2025.
sounds like a fear tactic, Jenny.
Well, I'm here now. I'm here for it. I'm invested. And it got me thinking, and I again did a post on LinkedIn about my goals for this year, and having not looked at them for probably the best part of 265 days, how I was doing on those, and it just there's something about coming into that last quarter of the year for me, which is a bit. What do I need to get done for the last quarter? And this isn't a bad freak out. This might feel like I'm like, oh my God, there's only 100 days left. But for me, it's more right. We've got 100 days left. Like, what are we doing? What's the real focus now in terms of things for me around like health or around the business or, what is it that I really want to do? So I just thought, I mean, I could ask you, what's your big thing for the next 100 days, but I've not asked you that before this call. So you're like, I don't know. I haven't even thought about it.
Well,
Just shaking my
I
head.
think it's more interesting to me are these numerical anchors that we center on. Like, what's the difference between 100 days and 101 days, or 100 days and
I
99
know.
days? And
Yeah.
there isn't one. So I would actually ask you, like, what is it about those things happening by December 31? Like, why is that the
Oh, well, so I work in 90-day cycles anyway. So for me, it's about the quarter. Like, what am
okay?
I doing for the next quarter?
Well,
And I
you
always
got 10 days to chill out then till the 90
Yeah, I know.
days
I'm
comes up
I'm
then.
I'm I'm
Okay.
just having a think. But I do like to do something on December 31st. So last year, December 31st, I did my first Couch to 5K run to kind of kickstart my plan for the new year. So I like to start the day before New Year because I feel like I'm very hungover on New Year's Day, and that's not a good day to start anything. But I like to do it a bit early. So it's more the quarter. I like a 90-day focus, and it just helps me think about that. So yeah,
Well, you
just
did a couch to 5K on December 31 last year. I walked the strip in Las Vegas on December 31 last year. So I won December 31 of last year. We'll see who wins this year.
Okay. How long's the strip? I don't even know how long
Well, I
that
didn't
is.
walk the entire strip, but
Oh, okay.
what's cool, no, easy. What's cool about Vegas on New Year's Eve is they close the strip down. So it's
Oh,
pedestrian
okay.
only. So you can actually walk on
Okay.
the physical strip. And it's a really cool experience to be
Okay.
out, not just on the sidewalks and the people, but actually walking on the
Yeah.
road on the Las Vegas Strip. So
Okay, that's fair. I thought you were like, I just walked down a road. I was like, okay.
easy.
That is everything for today. Thank you for joining us this week. All the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes, and please don't forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so that you don't miss another episode, and pass this along to someone that you think would enjoy listening or watching, because you can find Frequency on YouTube. Thank you to Poet Ali for contributing the music to the show, and we'll be back next week with more news, insights, and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.